Hello everybody and welcome back to Around the Campfire with AmeriCamp, the ultimate summer camp podcast. My name is Zara and I'm joined here today with Iwan, one of our amazing brand ambassadors and previous past and present applicants. So yeah, do you want to kick it off, Iwan, and introduce yourself and kind of talk about what camp you went to?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Iwan, and I've spent the last 2 summers at Camp Echo in New York. So I previously was meant to go in 2020, but obviously we know COVID stopped all of that. So I only managed to get to go last summer, which was incredible. And I only planned to go for one, but I ended up going back this year. And I said when I went in the summer, I was probably going to go back for one more year, and now I'm going back again for another year. So it's the camp bug, everyone gets it.
It's always how it works. I feel like with camp you can never like plan it and say, I'm only going to go for this number of time. You've just got to see where it takes you because, as you said, that camp bug, it gets you every time. I've done the exact same thing of 3 years when it was only a plan of one. So
I feel like it's even with like when you're on camp, you're like, oh, I remember I have such a vague memory of in my first 2 weeks or so, I was like, oh, I don't think I'll come back. It's too much and all this sort of stuff. And by week 4, I was like, actually, I might come back for 2 more years. I don't know yet. So
you're like calculating when you get home. So if I do this for that amount of time, could I then go back? Does the maths work out? It's always the way for sure. So yeah, obviously you've been 2 summers now, so you can kind of talk about both of those years. But this summer just gone then for you, how was that? Have you got any sort of like highlights and best bits, favourite parts and memories?
Yeah, it was interesting going back because obviously as a returner, you're the one that has more experience and you know what to expect in a way. But there's also so much that just happens on camp that it's so different each year. So I mean, I really enjoyed the fact that when in like orientation week, which again is always such a highlight, even though it's such a small part of camp, just getting to know the new people. And obviously my first year when I was there again to see what camp was like, you get a sort of taste for it without fully going into the intensity that we have with the kids. But yeah, it's so good just to have those relationships build back up, and jumping off the bus and seeing everyone again and seeing all your mates is just incredible, because although we have reunions throughout the year, it's not quite the same as when you're on camp living it. So yeah, being back on orientation week and just having that ability to obviously learn and teach what you learn from your first year, but also having those opportunities to build up relationships with people that you probably won't have as much chance when the kids arrive. Like, I always love it. And one of the things that I'm looking forward to next year is actually I'm changing roles I've been cabin counsel the last 2 years, but I'm going to change to high ropes, and that means I'm going to be out there from the start. So I'll be out there from like 2 weeks before the kids actually arrive, so it'll be nice to have an extended period almost. But like I would say definitely the summer I've just gone, like it was a bit of a difference for me again, because I went from 9th grade, which is for people who aren't aware, about 14-year-olds who were in upper camp, to 7th grade, which were about 12-year-olds, and they are the oldest in lower camp. So it was a completely different experience in that circumstance. And one of the big things that I actually really, really loved and didn't expect to was, I'm not a dancer, never have been. But in lower camp, you've got to just throw yourself into it. And there were so many new dances that I had to learn this year. So classics, obviously, I presume you've done the like Cotton Eye Joe and stuff like that, Kate. Zara,
of course. Yeah.
It's a staple of camps everywhere. But like we've learned some other ones. There was one which was an old Eurovision song that was Golden Boy, and I can still remember the dance. And there's some great videos that I'll tell the stories later of. But like when we were traveling, we'd get the songs up and we'd just be in an Airbnb somewhere still doing the dances. So that was a nice change of things going into lower camp, but also just like the energy as well. Like I loved my kids from last year, but I feel like if you've got the energy for it, lower camp is so rewarding because they'll want to be your best buddies. You'll want to always be around them and taking part in every activity. So yeah, it's been a nice change, definitely, and I feel like next year I definitely want to be with lower camp again. So
I love that. That's so nice as well that you got that opportunity to really get to know 2 groups of kids, because obviously one of those things that some people might think is a massive pro of returning is that you get to stay with the same group of children and move up with them and do everything like all over again with them. But I mean, I was similar to you in the sense that when I went back in second summer, I changed groups and I thought it was fantastic because I still got to see the children that I'd had the year before and still have that bond with them. But then I got to create so many new relationships with this new like group of kids, and it was like I had a second family then again.
Exactly
So
that. Yeah, and I just think like it's going to be quite nice for me next year because my first kids I had last summer. Now it's going to be their CIT summer. So for people who are unaware, that's the counselor in training. So it's their last year as campers, and a lot of them then will return the year after as counsellors. So they often will be helping out with the younger kids and organising a lot of events. So it'll be nice to have see them be the top dogs on camp, so to say.
yeah, you'd be like a proud dad.
Exactly that, yeah.
Watching
yeah.
them, taking the reins a bit more. That'd be
Yeah.
great. That'd be so nice to see for sure. Oh, well, it sounds like, you had such a good experience and both summers even. Like you're just like glowing when you're talking about camp, but it's so nice just, see that with our applicants and, I see it with my friends that have been to camp and everything. Nobody ever kind of comes back really with bad stories, do they? So it's so nice to see you had that experience too.
Yeah, it becomes a personality trait almost. Like I joke often with people I work with, like my personality trait is I'm Welsh, I like my sports, and I went to camp, and like those are like the ones that I talk about the most. But it does change you for a positive. So
no, 100%. So kind of thinking back to like 2 years ago now almost, when you were, well, I suppose it would have been back in 2020, but then when you actually ended up going to camp, how was it with the kind of hiring process and, choosing a camp? Did you go to any camp fairs, things like that? How did you find all of that?
So I was a very eager person where like I think people were still probably traveling in 2019 when I actually applied, because it was like the start of September when I was just before going to uni that I started applying, and I remember I did like an interview in person in Cardiff for it. I want to do, I'm very much a research sort of person where I'll try to find as much information as possible. So when I got the offer from Echo, I had two offers. I had one from Echo and one from another camp, which was based in, I think it was New Jersey, or maybe, I can't actually remember. It was like 4 years ago. And I looked at both, and the reason why I chose Echo was because of just the stuff they had on the website and looking at what they were doing. I then found out, although it was then 2 years down the line, or 3 years down the line, I suppose, although there's a lot of good information about camps on the website and YouTube and all that sort of stuff, sometimes it can be a little bit out of date. So the exact story I always say is, on the old Echo video, they had this massive pirate ship that they would have on the lake, and they'd have like all these videos and all that stuff. And then when we actually arrived, they were like, oh yeah, that's not been around for about 6 years. I was like, well, it's such a small thing that doesn't really make a difference. So I would say, do your research about camps, but realistically, you can only do so much until you actually get there. And I've already mentioned it before, but orientation, what is so great about it is you're going to be taught so much by your counsellors, by the leadership team. And if you're an activity staff member, obviously you're going to be with your group of people, and there's going to be so many people that can tell you things about it. There'll be, like I said, leadership, who obviously will take the main sessions, but then there's also the returners who know so much. There's the former campers that can tell you direct experiences, and like, I remember over the last 2 years, I still remember so many stories that people would retail of like from the years by that they've still memorized from when they were younger. So although you can do so much research, you can also, there'll be so much that you'll just learn on camp as well. So with expectations and all that stuff, obviously you do have a preconceived idea of Americans being loud and out there and all that stuff, and they are 100% that. But one thing is, like, I'm very extroverted in any way, I'd say, but there's still so many roles available for people who aren't that as well. And some of them, sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need a quieter figure who can do those one-on-one conversations and isn't always the person that goes out and about. And what's quite nice, at least on Echo, at Echo, was they still get recognised. And especially in, like, I'll use an example of like one of the sports coaches. He was talkative, outgoing, all that sort of stuff, but he wasn't like the loudest. But he was great for the senior boys because they were a bit more independent and could do their own stuff, whereas he was able to just sort of like help them when needed and stuff like that. So there's always going to be
Yeah.
places, and at least for our camp, leadership is very good at placing you. And if they don't place you in the right place in first year, they'll definitely know by second year, because I know for a fact I suited lower camp much better now that I've experienced it, but you can't always tell just
Yeah.
off of our one interview. So
No, for sure. And I think it's really interesting that you've kind of brought that up as well, because some people think that, camp is such a get up and go, you have to be, at 100% energy at all times. And I think something that I have very much kind of learned over the last 2 years is that it's like camp wouldn't run if it didn't have all of the different sort of personalities, in the sense that if everybody is this super extroverted, loud, like funny and just big personality, there's going to be clashes and it's just going to be chaos. So, in those senses, you need that people that can balance it out. Like, you need people from all walks of life, people that are going to sort of take the high road or be a bit quieter, or be the calm when someone else is running into the bunk being like, let's go and have a water fight and things like that. So no, it's really nice that you've kind of pointed out that camp is for everyone, and you will find your place, whether that's talking about the age groups, whether that's talking about the friends that you'll make there, the activities that you'll enjoy, things like that. So no, that's really nice that you pointed that out for sure. And I think
yeah.
with the how you're talking about like orientation as well, it's you really work that out in that time. People can sometimes be a bit worried about orientation and sort of thinking, oh, what does it entail? But as you've said, you're like the biggest advocate for it. It's so much fun, isn't it? And you
Yeah.
really, find your place while you're there in that point, in that sort of period of time, for sure.
One thing I would say as well is like there's obviously going to be a time where you feel a little bit clicky, and that's not on purpose at all. And most people will eventually get out of it, but it's you got to consider like when people have been away for however many months away from their best mates for 6, 7 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it was, they will immediately gravitate back towards them and be like, oh, I haven't seen you in this long. You'll find your place on camp. Same with the kids. I remember in my first year with the ninth grade boys, I was in a cabin of 5 counsellors with like 12 kids, and 3 of the counsellors had been with the kids in previous years. Some of them up to 3 years. Some of them had been with them for 2 years before. Some had been there the previous year, stuff like that. So the kids also gravitate towards them, and you feel sometimes a little bit left out.
Yeah.
But again, those relationships develop, and you get used to that as well. So it can be hard in the first couple of weeks, but you'll find your place on camp, and you'll find your people, and you'll find your groove in a way. So.
For sure. It is a process at the end of the day. It's not going to all be perfect in this like first day that you're there. In the same way that, as you said, like people can be potentially like a bit clicky, but it is just, they're like reuniting. And I remember I always had to remind myself this year, just gone like, oh, make other friends as well, because it's not just those people. But yeah, with the campers as well, you just got to take your time with them, and you're with them for 7, 8, 9 weeks, so they'll warm to you at some point in time for sure.
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, obviously you've spoken about kind of how the summer was with you being at camp, how it was being hired, and sort of what your recommendations are, I guess, for that. Now thinking to sort of post-camp, how was your sort of travel experiences the last 2 years? Because I bet you've been to some pretty cool places, having spent 2 summers over there now.
Yeah, it was. So in my first summer, it was a much shorter experience, and like we did a bit of we did a smaller road trip, but it was still incredible. And like we did, one thing that I think I've said to everyone is like for some reason a tradition that's come out of our camp is since like COVID, the first place that everyone goes to is Nashville for a few days, and
Love.
it's quite bizarre because obviously we have a staff night in New York where we were based, and then people always go straight to Nashville afterwards for like 2-3 days, and it feels like we just said all our goodbyes, but then oh wait, no, we're all in Nashville, so was there any point in that almost? And like that's such an incredible place. It's still one of my favorites like cities to go to, just because there's the nightlife and the culture of like it's obviously got a lot of country music and western music and stuff like that, but it's also got a nice variation of walking around and just doing stuff. So yeah, then in my first year we did a road trip then from Nashville to Dallas, Dallas to Austin, Austin to New Orleans. And I still will say one of my biggest regrets ever was we didn't get to New Orleans until like 10 p.m. overnight. And I had to fly back to New York at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I had maybe 1 hour, 2 hours of walking around before I had to go to bed and get up in the morning to fly home. So definitely still a place that I said I've been to, but not really been to, if you know what I mean. Whereas, this year, it's loved traveling last year. This year, it was absolutely unbelievable. I feel like it fit what I wanted a bit more. So, like I said, we did Nashville again, and then I traveled for pretty much the full month. So, if people are unaware, the visa allows you to travel 30 days before and 30 days after. And so we did a West Coast trip, and if people are watching on the video, you can sort of see on my bottle.
Oh, wow. Such a camp bottle.
It's great. I was very fortunate that I got all the stickers, because like some of the girls I was traveling with did it, and although I didn't do it initially, they had loads of spare ones, so I've got all the stickers of places we visited, and it's just like a nice reminder that I just want to keep building on. So yeah, we literally did a big road trip of 12 or so of us in three different cars, from San Francisco to Yosemite. We spent a few days in Yosemite, which I'll still maintain is my favorite ever place. I've been there on 2 separate occasions now, and like staying there for multiple days. You can stay there for like an entire month by itself, and you'd never get bored. Like there's so much to do there. Yeah, and then did like a road trip down to Morro Bay and Malibu and stuff like that before going to Zion, LA, Santa Monica, the Grand Canyon as well. But I keep saying that my favorite place I've ever been is Yosemite, but my favorite memory was when we were in Monument Valley, because at that point it was just our car left. The girls and some of the lads we were traveling with had flown back to the East Coast or back home, so it was just us 5 lads left, and we decided to go camping in Monument Valley.
Wow.
Which is, for people who aren't aware, it's like where they shot a lot of famous Western movies, and like Back to the Future 3 was shot partly there and stuff like that. So we stayed on a Native American reservation with a little family, and they had their own compound area, and we had our tent. It was just incredible, like seeing the sights and how quiet it was, but also like the stargazing. It's one of those things that when people say I was traveling afterwards, there may be concerns like, oh, will I find people to go do it? Literally, you'll find at least a group. Like our group, we had 4 lads together, and we're like, we'll go over here and all this sort of stuff. And next thing we know, we joined on with this group of 16 people or whatever it was. And so it was, it can be a bit daunting to like commit very early on to saying, I'm going to travel 30 days or whatever it is, however many days you have post-travel. But it's so worth it. And if you have the money for it, it's worth being a little bit out of pocket when you get back to the UK, but it is definitely worth it for the memory.
Sure.
So
I think with like the road trip aspect as well, it's so much easier to kind of save money that way.
Yeah.
I know my first year I was just getting flight after flight after flight, and my money went down very quickly. So yeah, that road trip route sounds amazing for sure. Yeah. And I think something that I kind of picked up on in that as well is like, obviously in your first year, and I feel like I was kind of similar, like you can only sort of do so much planning because you've never done it before, and you don't really know like where you're at, who you're going with, things like that. The bonus of being a returner at camp, as well as kind of knowing the people at camp and knowing the ropes and being able to help people whilst you're there, that travel period after is so much easier when you've already done something like it before, because you know what not to do and how to save that money and things like that, and you know how to plan your time better. As you said, with like that New Orleans situation, like you probably didn't have a situation where you did that again this year because you regretted it a little bit. So, but that sounds honestly immense.
Yeah, and like you said about the driving side of things, it was actually surprisingly not too expensive. Like
I found that.
Yeah, it's like you would have expected it quite expensive and all that stuff, and with the space, do you have a big enough car? But between 5 of us, we had the car for like 18, 19 days, and it was 2.2 grand, which initially seems like, whoa, that sounds a lot. But when you split it down, if you compare as well to if you want to travel about, flights are so expensive, cars are so much more feasible, and even the petrol
100%.
was...
It's not that bad at all.
It's not bad. About 50 quid to fill the tank up, I'd say.
I think if people are comfortable with driving in America, I would always say that. You see so much more of the country as well. Some of my favourite memories were just driving around and like singing in the car and just
Yeah.
looking out the window thinking, gosh, how has it all led to me driving down this road right now kind of situation.
It was like in Zion and Yosemite. There's those two famous like tunnels which you go through where it sort of emerges, and if you've ever seen like travel
Yeah.
TikToks, you'll see it all the time.
Uh-huh.
And I remember we were like, okay, we need to find the perfect song to play whilst we're going through. One of them was How to Train Your Dragon, that theme, and the other was Outro by M83, the one where it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's got, yeah, it's like I was getting goosebumps. It was incredible to do, and like you don't get to experience that if you're on a bus because you're then like with some other people and you're like, oh, I'm gonna have to squeeze through. And like you said, those little road trips that you did off the cuff, where like you're thinking, okay, our Airbnb's here, we're going here today, where else can we stop off along the way? And you'll find so many nice little towns and random encounters and stuff like that. So, and like you said, it can be a little bit daunting to drive on the left hand side of no, the right hand side even. It's once you get used to it, it's no different. And like it was also the fact how you drive in a automatic. It's weird to start with, but honestly, I find it easier. So like,
No,
yeah,
for sure.
it's definitely worth
You
it.
get used to it super quick. I mean, we drove through like the first time that we got the car was in the middle of LA, and I had to get in the car and just drive around. I was thinking, oh my God, it's going to be awful. And within 5 minutes, you're fine. Having that freedom, and as you said, like popping into those random little spots in like a 10-hour road trip. Like we ended up at the High School Musical hotel at one point, and we were like, have we done this? But no, I 100% agree with you that it's the best way to do things for sure. So obviously you said that you've been twice, you're going for a third year. You are clearly very into the AmeriCamp program. What would you say to anybody, and I'll give you this in two kind of ways, but what would you say to anybody that's looking at doing AmeriCamp for the first time or has been to camp before and is potentially thinking about returning but not too sure?
Yeah, so I'd say for people who've never come to camp, like I said before, you are going to have incredible summer and you will find your people. It may not happen straight away, but you will get to develop those relationships within your cabin, within your grades as well. So like we had two bunks per grade, so you'll meet people there as well. You'll find people that you didn't even realize live nearby. I remember because I went to university in Sheffield and I was big into my sport and we had our varsity with Sheffield Hallam. I remember one time when it was raining and we were all tucked up in our hall, there was a Sheffield Hallam bottle. I was like, hang on, there's someone there who's the enemy. And then we jokingly became a rivalry and we were doing like, oh, we should do a varsity on camp and stuff like that. And so you will find people that you just didn't expect to meet and stuff like that. But I'd also say take the time to have your breaks as well. Because although I'm very extroverted, I know when my social battery is running low and I need times to recharge. So we haven't really spoke much about it, but like nights off and days off and all that stuff. Don't feel scared to just say, I'm going to maybe have a chill night and stay on camp and actually just like stay in a staff lounge or just watch YouTube, watch Netflix. Because although you'll want to socialize and be out all the time with people and making friends and memories, you do need time to recharge, as well as obviously when you're traveling afterwards, because that can be exhausting. So yeah, I mean, I feel like for returners, it can be very easy to be cliquey, as we've said, but you just also need to remember that you were once in a position of not knowing anyone and being scared and really wanting to be approachable in that sense. And there is the positives of going back as a returner are you just know what to expect, you know the traditions, you know the silly little things that go about, and like with like doing flag raising and flag lowering, we know that our camp leader is going to be doing the two finger the peace sign to say no talking, let's get ready and all that sort of stuff and all that. So there's you can be that mentor in a way, and you can still make so many memories, even though you may have felt like it could have been a bit repetitive towards the end. You still can just go in with a fresh mindset and be like, yeah, I want to do this again. I know what I want to be. And yeah, I'd also, like I said, be flexible with the ages, because I was very adamant I wanted to be with the same kids. And when I heard that, I was like, I don't know if it's the same with some camps, but like ours, they're not, maybe not adamant, but they really want to push so that people have new ages most years, and like they'll only keep you if they feel like you're the perfect fit for them. But yeah,
Okay.
be adaptable with that, because camp knows best and they know when you can fit in and do well in these places. And it's also good new opportunity to try something, because you'll still see those kids on camp, but yeah, it's also a good opportunity to meet some new kids and experience new things with them.
Yeah, for sure. No, that was great. Well, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today. It's been so nice reminiscing on all of your experiences and, learning all about them. And, this really has just shown people why we have so many people that come back and again, to go and get those experiences, whether they're the same as the first year or new. So, yeah, I've really appreciated chatting with you today. But if anybody else wants to come onto the podcast, then let us know. You can drop us an email. We always love hearing about the experiences, just like Ewan's, that we've been speaking about today. So get in touch with us. But for now, that is all from us. Thank you, Ewan.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Bye.